Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. This episode is brought to you by Audio Academy. Whether you're a recent high school graduate, a busy mom, a working woman seeking to enhance her skills, or a female entrepreneur looking for a better understanding of digital marketing, we've got you covered. Dive into the digital marketing world without drowning in student loan debt or compromising your values. Visit audioacademy.com/podcast and claim $150 off Audio's women's only cohort of our Digital Marketing Fundamentals career course by entering the code MENTOR at checkout. That's odeoacademy.com/podcast. Empower your career and save $150 with code MENTOR today. Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Gavin, founder of Optidge Marketing Professor and the host of the Digital Marketing Mentor. Today, we have a very special Office Hours episode with Leah Leaves, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Optidge. Leah is the queen of organization and efficiency. With her organizational brilliance and her beloved spreadsheets, she builds and maintains systems and processes so the team runs like a well-oiled machine. Leah's superb structure ensures our team can do their jobs so that our clients get top-notch service. Aside from holding numerous digital marketing certifications and a BA in technical journalism, Leah is a lifelong learner and participates in executive coaching, online training courses, and professional masterminds. Today, we are going to talk with Leah about learning the 3 practical strategies to nurturing efficiency in remote digital marketing agencies. Hey, Leah, how are you?
I'm doing great today. I'm so excited to be on the podcast.
So Leah was actually my partner in coming up with the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. So I don't know why I took like a bunch of episodes, but I'm really glad that you're here today. I guess to start off, I'd love to tell people how we met. I think that's pretty cool. So the way that I tell people is back in the middle of COVID, there was this social network called Clubhouse. You know, either you know what it was or you never heard of it because it had its glory and then it left. So Moshe Poltrak, who it was a guest on the podcast, he had this room on Fridays all about jobs in the marketing space. And for those people who don't know about Clubhouse, this is a social network, which is audio. So imagine chat rooms where people are talking. You've got people on the stage who are allowed to speak, and then people in the audience who can listen and they can raise their hand if they want to come up on the stage and talk. And it was pretty cool. It was awesome during the pandemic to allow people to interact, even though they were, at home and isolated. I was invited by Moshe to one of these sessions, and I think I was on the stage to talk about it. And then walks in this lady, Leah Leaves. And, she comes up to the stage and she's like, "Hey, everyone, I'm Leah Leaves. I'm a fractional COO for digital marketing agencies." And when I heard that, I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that existed. And, obviously the conversation went well. I don't remember the specifics, but afterwards, I myself was struggling in the agency, handling too much. And I knew that I needed some sort of help. And when I heard that there was this concept of a fractional COO, I was like, this is really cool. And obviously spoke with Leah. At first I was a little bit like, oh my gosh, am I literally handing my keys to someone that I don't even know? But kind of got over that. We had a 3-month trial and the rest is history. We've been working together for more than 2 years, and it's really been one of the biggest blessings that Optidge and myself have had. So that's the story. Do you remember it the same way?
I do. I remember that I came into the room and I was looking for a digital marketing specialist for one of my clients at the time. And I'll go to pretty much, any ends that I need to, and try anything for my clients. And especially on the recruiting side, finding the right fit for the right seats. It's really important to get the right team members in. And I remember being on Clubhouse for a while and then finally finding some of these more specific rooms around digital marketing agencies and marketers. And I remember listening to you and Moshe. And I think even when I was on stage and you had, I think, jumped in with a question, I think you even mentioned like on the stage, I think we need to talk. Yeah, I think we need to follow up after this. And I was like, oh, of course, and just wanting to follow up and stay connected. Yeah, and like you said, the rest is history because now it's 2 years plus later. Yeah, and not on Clubhouse anymore, but still definitely fractional COOing for digital agencies.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's still on Clubhouse, but no, there are. It's still kind of breathing. So, Leah, let's start at the beginning. Where did you go to school and what did you study?
So I actually went to Colorado State University for technical journalism. I was very lucky, to be in the International Baccalaureate program in my high school. So I ended up starting, with over a year's, college credit. And as much as I love learning and studying, I'm more of a on the job kind of learner. So wanted to get into and out of university, as fast as possible. And I was very, very lucky, to work with a few amazing companies remotely, during the time that I was in university. And so I paired my technical journalism skills and background, with some online remote work, with I'd say somewhat journalistic, capabilities, but more so transitioning into marketing pretty early on, and recognizing the beauty of working remotely. So that's kind of where I started, and I like sharing my background from technical journalism because I think it absolutely informs how I structure operations. Everything in journalism has beginning, middle, and end. Every story, you can really mark that arc, and identify it. When you're reading through a story, whether you're on creative writing side, or on the technical side, and so that's really informed building out operations of always having the bookends, always having the beginning and the end, and then meeting in the middle, for those milestones. So I was really lucky also to join the remote world quite early on in my career, because 99.9% of my experience, in the professional world has all been remote.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's kind of like you were setting yourself up for the world later on, but you never knew it.
hmm Exactly. And I can't imagine, how people work, in an office 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Granted, there are some pros and cons of, working online and remotely. And you really have to learn those boundaries, early on, and learn, how to build in that structure for yourself so you can maintain, that work-life balance. Like when you do walk out of your office, you need to be walking into your home, even if it's, through a doorway, rather than, commuting, 30 or 60 minutes away.
So your early work in the agency space was in content writing and SEO. And often when you talk to people, you actually mention yeah, I used to do SEO. Then you transitioned to the broader operations role. So what drove that path to move and pivot?
Well, first and foremost, I still love SEO. I love it with all of my heart. That is definitely, where my soul is, on the marketing side. It's definitely on more of the organic side, but I have embraced, both paid and organic, and really learned a lot. And I think, the love from it came from honestly working with small online businesses, that needed local SEO. And so I understood the impact, quite tangibly, through seeing it, in their results and in their revenue. And I think where it really started to shift for me was seeing actually the team members who were working on those types of campaigns, for like lead gen, for example. I saw their faces light up, when one of their campaigns, would hit it out of the park. And I would also see their faces, just fall and crumble to pieces, when that one piece, of a campaign was missing, that they couldn't find it, whether it was like in Google Drive or Dropbox or, wherever, that they were really trying to optimize something and they found out later, a piece of information from the client that they could have asked, ahead of time. There were just so many things on the back end that were just messy, and it was really impacting, the results, and ultimately then it impacted the team. Yeah, and how they felt about things, how they wanted to work or not work, at some of the agencies that I was with at the time. And so it just kind of naturally brought out my organizational tendencies, just wanting to put things in order, and clean things up, and make sure that people just know like where to go for what, who's doing what are we doing in the first place, and then of course, like, how are we doing this? And so I started getting into management and project management, account management, ops management, becoming an ops director, and then ultimately the COO. And I like having that 30,000 foot view and still getting my hands into the deep end, and I think that's, the beauty of operations is that you can have a bit of both. You can have the big picture, but then also be in the details. And it's a beautiful space to be in if you like to have a bit of control, which I'll be totally honest about, but then you also like to really be a servant leader, because it is about giving the team, the best environment, the best space to be in, to let them do their best work, and really enjoy it, because then the client gets the best, out of the whole bunch. So that's where it kind of started transitioning into operations and how it came to be where it is today.
So you've worked freelance at different points in your career. As a fractional COO, some would frame that approach similar to freelancing because you are on your own at certain points. At the same time, you're a huge proponent of team building and training. While freelancing can seem very isolated and independent to many, how do you meld those two realities together?
First, it is what you make of it. Right. So everyone who thinks that freelancing is being siloed or being on a desert island by yourself is honestly just, drinking the Kool-Aid. They are not giving it its due opportunity, which is, again, what you can make of it, which is a beautiful opportunity that we all have. That I have some of the best team members that I get to work with. I have the best experiences, and who cares, if it's freelance, or if it was as an employee. Right? To me, I don't think that we need to have a delineation of being a great team member or doing great work, if you're one or the other. So to me, I know that a lot of my clients and my team members just see me as the COO, right? They see me just as another team member, not as a fractional, team member or an independent contractor. So I think it absolutely is how you want it to be. And if you want it to be inclusive, you want it to be, building a team connection and, really be able to have that rapport and those relationships, then you make it the way it is.
Yeah, and I think you're really a shining example of that. Like I always, people ask me fractional COO, that means that like their mind is fractionally there. But it's pretty amazing, Leah, how you're able to really, when you put yourself into, one of your clients, one of your businesses, you're very present. And the people that you deal with don't feel like you're working with anyone else. I can imagine that to a point it's difficult, but it's amazing that you're able to do that. And then in addition to that, as Optidge has scaled, we do have full-time employees, but we do have a lot of contractors. And it's amazing how you've been able to like create and set that standard. It doesn't really matter how you get paid, but you can still be part of the team. Not only do you live that yourself, but then you're also able to enlighten others to look at contractors, part-time people, really as equal parts of the team, whether they're getting paid a full salary or not.
I think it's really important, particularly for the independent contractors, to feel a part of a team because of the stigma, I think, that comes along with being an independent contractor or freelancer, that people often, will look at them as disposable. It's such a terrible word to use, but honestly, it's a tragic position that I think a lot of people have experience with freelancers and independent contractors only through sites like Upwork or Fiverr or things like that. So they only know them for one-hit wonders, or really small, basic tasks. Like I'm thinking TaskRabbit is another one. And there's nothing wrong with using those platforms when you have something really specific, that you need to have completed. But you're not going to have a relationship out of that. You're going to get, the output that you expected, and that's it. Yeah. And for an independent contractor or freelancer, it's really important for them to feel a part of the team, because then they're going to give you their best work as well. And so getting out of that stigma of they're disposable or, they're easily replaceable, or they don't have as much skin in the game. It's like if you present them, to the rest of the team as a team member, not as, oh, this is an employee or this is an independent contractor. Again, whether it's fractional, or it's full time, it shouldn't matter if you're there for the right reasons. You share the same core values. You are on board with the mission. You really care, about the client's success, and the client results. Then again, who cares, if you're there 10 hours a week, or 40 hours a week. So a lot of independent contractors, I feel like, can do more for their cause by being also more engaged and upfront at the very beginning, right? It's not all on like the business owners or on the recruiting specialists. It's also on the independent contractors to speak up for themselves and say, I want to be part of something bigger, and I can do that, if you give me, more trust, or if we build up more confidence together and I can go above and beyond. And this is what it looks like. The same thing, for a regular team member, or a quote unquote employee, is that they can all vouch for themselves, and that comes back into like team building and coaching and mentoring, which I know is something that you're so natural at. in your role, within Optidge, but then also in the podcast, and other, avenues, is that natural mentorship is something that I wish people could just open themselves up to, by asking more questions, by saying, hey, I would love to sit in on this meeting and just be a fly on the wall. Or can I watch one of those recordings? I'd love to learn more. So independent contractors can do just as much, and put themselves out there, to be more a part of the team as well.
So, given the availability of contract workers and freelancers in all manner of fields, focuses, and specialties, how do you determine full-time or contract? And how do you determine when to bring on new team members?
This is a question I get often, and there are a lot of variables that can be considered. There's a lot of input that you can definitely research, online. And my rule of thumb, for when you hire a contractor, versus an employee or vice versa, comes down to a matrix of the volume multiplied by the complexity. Right. And so when we're looking at particular tasks or types of work that have a low level of volume, say that you literally can say it's 10 hours a week, that's low volume, and it's low complexity, right? Somebody can do it over and over and over again. And it's the same, maybe per client, it's the same per day, whatever that low complexity variable is, a contractor is my best go-to. Is that that you can plug someone in and get that thing done again over and over and over. It can be reliable, it can be consistent. Now if you start going into okay, it is high volume. Maybe you have a ton of leads, to process, and and this goes to like call tracking and call listening. So you have high volume. You maybe have like hundreds of calls, for your particular clients that you have to get through every single month. But the complexity is pretty low. You need somebody to listen to the call. You need them to take notes, and enter the information in the CRM. Great. That's pretty standard. That's pretty straightforward. Honestly, if the volume is not high enough to warrant a full-time person, like if you literally do not have 30 plus hours a week worth of work, it's not high enough volume, go with a contractor. You can find amazingly reliable, consistent, and hardworking team members, remotely, and across the seas, so you can find people that can do that type of work and hit the nail on the head for you every time. And then we go into, okay, let's say that especially when we get into the higher complexity, types of tasks. Now we're talking about like strategic work. We're talking about, okay, we need, a digital marketing strategist to talk with us and our clients, about how do we manage, this 3-month, paid campaign. And we've got 2 platforms, we've got 3 stakeholders, like we've got all kinds of stuff mixed in here. If it's less than 10 hours a week, it's low volume and it's very, very specific to also, and I'm not saying just maybe low volume on number of hours, but maybe low volume on number of clients. Maybe it's only for like 2 or 3 clients. This is, I think, aligned with, kind of the fractional COO work, is that if you can find somebody that knows exactly what they're talking about, is going to fit that bill 100% of what you're looking for. They have all the skills and expertise, and they have the experience to back it up, and you just need it for like just a few cases, go with that contractor again, and leave the door open, to bring them on, full-time in the future, if that were to expand, if that's one of your plans. But you'll see in 3 out of the 4 cases I've already talked about, I'm talking about contractors, because I feel like there is a wealth of knowledge out there that we can tap into, on a fractional, freelance, independent contractor basis, to get the right person in the right seat. Because then the case for having an employee, is high complexity and high volume. That they're going to need to bounce around to multiple things. They're going to have to wear multiple hats. And I'm also talking about specifically with smaller agencies, where everyone has to pull a little bit more than, their own weight, because, we don't have always the capacity to bring on specialists or strategists for one very specific task or one very specific ask. So we have to, again, be a little bit more complex, and be able to service that. And so that's when I would reserve, holding on to that full-time employee role, for small agencies, is for that high volume, high complexity, because then it also makes your agency more complex, right? You have to consider all the legalities, bringing on employee, benefits. You have to really think through all of the HR components, to make sure that it's the best experience long term for both you and them. Not that I'm ever promoting turnover, with contractors, but I'll be honest, it's easier if there is turnover. With employees, it's just harder. It takes longer. There are more costs associated with it. And I'm not anti-employees. I absolutely love them, and I know that there's that right place for them. But I think it comes back to it's got to be the right person for the right seat, and having that clarity ahead of time, versus just based off of like only numbers or only gut instinct. You have to have that blend of the two, and this is kind of the approach that I take with it.
How did you get into the realm of fractional COOing in the first place?
Ooh, do you want the heavily personal version or the more succinct professional version?
I think the personal version would be good, but we can try to keep it succinct as well.
Yes, both, all in one. Well, that's what I offer is all the things. How I got into fractional COOing, and I love that verb, COOing. So I was a COO with an agency back in 2016 to 2019 as a full-time employee. And to this day, I still love the agency. I'm still in contact, with the visionary there and many of the team members. But I found that over those years, I completely lost my identity. I became the agency, not Leah, the COO, at the agency. I really struggled with that understanding, and with that realization until I honestly burned myself out, and it was all on my own doing. But in September of 2018, I hardcore burned myself out. I was in a major depression. I was having a lot of issues, at home. And honestly, even though I was a functioning workaholic, it was starting to crack. The veneer was starting to crack. And even though I had had conversations with my visionary, at the time, and I was the integrator amongst the COO, and he was definitely looking out for me, it really was up to me to hit that rock bottom and then have to make a hard decision, and find my way out of that. And so ultimately, what came out was I needed to part ways with them because I couldn't just be in the role, without being, the whole identity, of the agency. And so we started to transition me out. We decided, that ultimately it wasn't going to work, as part-time, especially since I'd been there in a certain capacity for so long. And I had kept my business open on the side, and this was something I'd negotiated with. And so the visionary knew about it, but I'd kept my business open on the side since 2013. And I decided, at that point, I needed to either get rid of it, or kick the tires and really make a go for it and become a little bit more of that visionary integrator, hybrid, myself. And so back in about end of 2020 is when I really revamped it and rolled it out. I had been doing some operations consulting, but honestly, that's not me either. I am not a consultant. I don't come in and give you a plan and then head out the door. Again, I like getting my hands dirty, getting into the deep end, being alongside, other visionaries, in agencies and helping the team, really hit that next stage of growth and do it in a sustainable fashion. And so it was sometime in 2019, 2020 that I had heard the term fractional COO instead of like operations consultant or, strategic planning consultant. And my brain just exploded. I'm like, how have we not had this before? Right? Everyone's heard of, outsourced CFOs or fractional CFOs, for chief financial officers for years. My mother was one, for years. She owned her own business as a CFO, outsourced CFO for 20 plus years. And it had never occurred to me to do that on the same side as operations. So we now have had this huge boom with fractional leadership roles, and fractional is used mostly with executive level positions. So you'll see like outsourced operations managers or, virtual assistants, but typically fractional you'll see just for the C-level roles. And it really opened up the door, to what I do best. It is hands-on. It is what I love to do. Is partnering with really cool agency owners and their amazing teams to drive incredible success, for their clients. And so that, I mean, that's where we're at now is really embracing the fractional COO role, embracing the outsourced operations professionals, and making sure that agencies, digital marketing agencies, can avoid the burnout culture that we're often known for. It's often talked about. I experienced it myself, and I'm here to help reverse that course.
Ladies, are you seeking a flexible, satisfying, and well-paying career? Do you resonate with psychology, excel with words, and brave the tech world effortlessly? Digital marketing might be your calling, and our women's only cohort at Odeo Academy is tailored to you. Learn the ropes without a 4-year commitment, without compromising on your values, and without leaving the comfort of your home. Our course is designed to support women from high school grads to business mavens in launching their digital marketing career. Check out audioacademy.com/podcast. And don't forget to use the code MENTOR at checkout for a special $150 off. Act fast. Our Digital Fundamentals career course begins October 29th. Remember, it's odeoacademy.com/podcast. Claim your $150 discount with code MENTOR today. Super. So I think we have a really good foundation. Now let's jump into navigating the 3 secrets to building high-performing teams in remote digital marketing agencies.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this. I mean, anytime I get to talk about operations for agencies, I get a little tingly because I'm just like, this is so exciting because someone can benefit from this. Everyone can benefit from this. But it really comes down to 3 main strategies. The first one is building an absolutely amazing team onboarding experience. And I'll give you some more details, on that. But before that, I'll share all 3 and then I'll kind of circle back. So the first is having that amazing team onboarding experience. The second is having transparent communication in the agency. That's a big one for me that I'll tell you more about. And then the third one is having killer organization. Honestly, like standardization and organization, if you have those in your agency, you're a head and shoulders above a lot of other people, not just agencies, but online businesses in general. So going back to that first one, building out, an amazing team onboarding experience. The reason I start here is because if you can calm someone's nerves and make them feel like they're in the right place, literally in the first hour, of working with them remotely, you've practically won the war, right? Because I've heard it time and time again from contractors, from full-time employees, from individual consultants, even, that will come in and, after that first onboarding experience, just like, wow, I'm blown away at how organized it is, how clear everything is. Like, I know exactly what I should be doing, what's coming next, who to go to for what, and like just what to do, because so many people will come in, especially from a remote, perspective, and they may give, you access, and say, okay, here you go. Like, jump in. It's like, jump into what? If you typically don't even have a job description to start with, you don't have, direction on who am I supposed to be meeting with? Am I part of a department or am I on my own? Are you expecting me, especially as an independent contractor, are you expecting me to like just start producing work, or do I need to do some background research first? So really having that onboarding experience where you have everything set up ahead of time. And like, note this, the biggest asterisk on this is access. When I say having everything set up, I'm not just talking about like paperwork and like their first, Google login. It's everything needs to be set up. They need to have access to the time tracking platform, to file management, to project management, to communication tools. They need to be added, to all of the folders, or all the logins. If you have, which you should, a password management tool, they should have access to the right subfolders in that. So access is so key to set up, because I can't tell you how many people get irked, with jumping into the deep end. And then they're like, oh, I can't access that. I have to request access, and it slows everyone down. So having access set up, jumping into the deep end by having every single hour of their first week really detailed out for them, again, whether it's 10 hours or 40 hours, having that actually mapped out, assigned to them with deadlines, it just relieves so much tension, and really they can just show up, and be who they are and bring their best self, if they have that kind of red carpet just rolled out for them. So it streamlines the whole experience, in my opinion. If you've got that one thing nailed, you could do so much more with them long term.
And the crazy thing is that there's actually agencies or remote businesses that don't have these things. And it's I don't know how they manage. And you could also understand like businesses that maybe aren't remote and never had these processes or systems that were set up, why they look at remote as being so crazy, which makes sense, right? Because if they don't have these things, how are they going to be able to now do those same things in person remotely? So you can't take for granted these wonderful processes and systems that allow people to be remote. And that's the key. Like, if you don't have them, it's going to be very difficult to expand your business and to be successful in this remote world.
I agree wholeheartedly. And take shadowing as a great example. Oftentimes, if you're looking at shadowing, in an in-person office, it is literally somebody just over your shoulder shadowing you and kind of watching, as you go. And if you don't set up the expectations of what shadowing looks like remotely, right, and you don't have the expectation of, oh, are we doing it over a Slack huddle? Am I just doing screen share? Do I need to be narrating it, as I'm doing it, or should I be sending a Loom video ahead of time and then we're actually brainstorming it together, or you reviewing it together, things like that. There's so much detail that you have to think through. And when I say you, I mean the operations person, right? Like, it's so much easier to have the operations individual, that right hand person, that can manage those details, and make sure that it's going smoothly. Because I'll be honest, like talking to you, Danny, the owner of an agency, like, it's not your responsibility, right? You have so many other things to do, and particularly driving home, the vision, of the agency, and making sure that the systems and processes are improved from a high level view, to make sure that success is managed again from that bigger picture view, for clients. Like, that's, the ideal role, for the owner, rather than, being in the details of, oh, do you have access to this? Or, hey, let's talk through the process of shadowing. So that's where the operations, individual can really come in and make a huge difference. And that's just the first strategy as well, is, just on the new team member onboarding. So in transparent communication, just as much as I emphasize the actual access that's needed in the first step, right, the new team member onboarding, the second is the transparency in communication. Again, this is very similar to the distance between like in person versus remote, is that in person, you could literally hear something from the next cubicle, or over, the desk across from someone, versus remotely, so many people rely on direct messages. And then you get into, oh, I'm direct messaging this person and then direct messaging that person. And then now I have 5 different direct messages all saying the same thing. Why aren't we in a group together? Right. And it's like this round robin that I have constantly of, we need to over communicate, and the best way to do that is do it transparently. Do it in the project management tool, do it in the communication tool. If you're in Slack, do it in a public channel. If, of course, there are those instances, like if it's HR related, if it's sensitive information, oh my gosh, yeah, take that offline. Don't even write that down, in Slack. Like, let's make sure we have a call about it, or a Zoom. Otherwise, anything that has to do, with regular working processes, within the agency, or anything to do with a client, oh my gosh, write that down, document it, and make sure other people see it. And let me tell you, this comes in handy, particularly when you are growing and you have more team members that you're adding in, or you have to hand off accounts between team members, or you're trying to just train, individuals, on, this is what we're doing, this is what we've done. No matter if you've changed the process half a dozen times, it's so important for the team to see that, and it builds trust, because if they can see what other people have literally thought through by typing it out and saying, oh, we could do it this way. Oh no, let's try it that way. Right. Then it also shows that they can speak up. right? That everyone's voice is valued. And that gets into a little bit more of like the team building side, but ultimately, it comes back to, over communication and really making sure that it's transparent, that everyone is a part of it. You get it for double duty. You get the team building side, and you get the actual development, of your processes, your standardization, your growth, as a company. So try and stay out of direct messages as much as possible. Communicate, in more public spaces. Whether it's a group channel, or even better, just stay in the project management, tool. Stay in that platform and just document it along the way.
With regard to documentation, I wanted to bring up, so obviously at Optidge, we had two of our wonderful team members who went on a maternity leave, and we went through the exercise of, they had a lot documented anyhow before they left, but we had to document even more, before and led up to it. And it's just been so amazing. Like, we've been able to bring in contractors on a temporary basis who literally have been able to dive in and do their job and still have that Optidge feel and know how we do and understand things, because the SOPs are there, the checklists are there, and everything was great. I mean, we just had a story, it was like a week ago, where one of our contractors never actually launched a new campaign before. And we basically tasked him, okay, you're going to have to launch this. And maybe we should have said, hey, look over here for that list. But he knows, like, we have lists for everything. So he, went to the folder where it was there. And he was just so excited, like, I can't believe it. Like, everything is laid out. Like, I know exactly what it is and I'm not going to miss a step. And it's just amazing to see the power of documenting things. And you never know. Like, you never know when, someone's going to leave the organization. You never know when someone's going to go on maternity leave. So it's really, really important. And we see the extreme value that it brings to an agency.
Oh, 100%. And the level of psychological safety that it gives to not only the agency owner, right, knowing that they could step away, if they needed to or wanted to, but also to the other team members, knowing that they can train someone else, to do that area of work that maybe they still like to do, but they know that they want to do something even more. They want to expand, they want to evolve, they want to learn and grow, which we encourage them, especially at Optidge. Right? We want them, to reach above and beyond and keep that growth pattern and keep, honestly, not just for themselves, but then training and growing, those other team members. But like, that all connects back into documentation, and standardization, because especially for agencies, I often get a pushback, when I'm first working, with a new agency owner or new agency team, because they feel often that standardizing things, and just putting everything in a process, document, getting everything down on paper, they often will push back and say, honestly, that sounds corporate, or that sounds too structured, or that sounds like you're sucking the soul out of my agency. Just like, it's so tragic, but it's all about actually infusing, the soul back into it by getting rid of that 80% that is just busy work, right? I mean, think of how much time, and I literally, like, I can rack up, the minutes in my head for all the different team members we have, of when anybody says, like, oh, where is this? Right? And if you've got one person asking, where is this? I can guarantee another 3 haven't raised their hand and said it out loud, but they're thinking it, right? And then you've got another, like, 5 people in a department that are all needing to take a break and chime in. And, then maybe someone gets the wrong link and now it's like, oh, wait, there's a duplicate. It's like, oh my gosh, it can get so frenetic so quickly, and so the structure that we're looking to build in and the standardization, is honestly really to make everyone's lives easier, so that they can bring that soul of the agency, which is strategic thinking, which is creative brainstorming. They can really have that opportunity, because they know, like, the basics are covered or the foundation is set. So that goes again back to, like, over communicating, documenting along the way. And for anyone that, struggles with that, I often recommend just flip on Loom. Just start recording yourself, so instead of having to, like, think through up the process and, like, write it all down and be super organized, like, if that's not your style, that's okay. You can just record yourself doing what you do best, hand it over to someone in the ops department, to make it an SOP, but then you have the freedom to just, like, talk it out, or to just demonstrate it. So there's a lot of different ways to document along the way. It's just important to be aware of it.
A good example for that is, it's really about breaking things down in order to build it back up. So it's like a caterpillar going into that cocoon and totally changing itself to become that beautiful butterfly, or a seed decomposing, going through that rough, but then suddenly this amazing plant comes from it. So, in one perspective, it's like, oh my gosh, you're like, it's destroying, it's destruction, it's breaking this down, it's not what it was. But honestly, only through that are you able to actually get this beautiful outcome. And you kind of have to, that's why you have to have a little bit of faith in that COO or that integrator, who you can rely on to be like, even though right now it looks a little scary, or, it looks like a dark cocoon, but you don't realize that when you do go into that, it's going to, create this beautiful butterfly.
I love that. I'm totally going to use that. Thank you.
Definitely. So you've touched upon this a little bit before, but I think this is a great time to move into number 3, which is all about organization.
Yes. So the organization is so key. And honestly, it may sound really intimidating, I think, at the beginning, because people look at it of, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to organize everything? Or how am I supposed to document everything? And that's not the ask at the beginning, right? I really encourage them to focus on the fundamentals, focus on the most basic elements first, of, okay, what does that story arc look like for your department, right? And start with the bookends, onboarding and offboarding. So client onboarding, what does that look like in your department? And client offboarding, what does that look like? So, and this can be, for any department. It doesn't have to be just on delivery, or in service. You can look at it, from the finance perspective, and say, okay, what does it look like to onboard a new client, and set them up in our financial systems? What about if they cancel services? What do we need to have, as like their final receipts, and those transactions recorded? And so every single department, across an agency, you can just start there, with very basic, bookends of where do we start a process and where do we stop a process. And oftentimes I will start a lot of processes at the process level, not the procedure level. And there's a very distinct difference between those two, because a process, and this is actually a reference to Cameron Herold, who is a COO guru, and just adore him. He's written the book, The Miracle Morning, and has I think it's the COO, council or something. He knows everything about operations and has worked with like massive companies. And so he is someone that I follow pretty religiously. But one thing that he shared years ago that has always stuck with me is that a process is a process of, if you can fit it on a Post-it note. So if you can succinctly put together the steps of the process into such a short amount of space and a concise amount of space that you can have it on a Post-it note, that's a process. Versus a procedure, which is like a technical manual, right? It's the step-by-step how to with screenshots, with links to, okay, open this and then click that. And so more often than not, when I talk about let's document things, let's get organized, people think, oh my gosh, I have to build a whole technical manual and it's going to be like 1,000 pages. It's like, no. Deep breath. Let's take a big step back. Let's just start with taking the beginning and the end. And then what is like the one thing in the middle that you guys do? And oftentimes, for most delivery departments, it becomes, you've got your onboarding or setup phase. You've got your building or project phase. So it's a very clear, deliverable at the end, like a launch. And then you've got your account phase, or your ongoing kind of retention phase. And so if we can just start with those 3 phases, then we can come down and next step. Okay, what happens in the project phase? How do you build, a campaign? And how do you make sure you have quality assurance, quality control? What does the creative process look like? And then you bring each one of those down another level. And so we start big and then pull it down to the small. And that is the type of organization that I recommend as well, is that when we look at, for example, your file management, if you're using like Google Drive, start with a shared drive that you have clients, one shared drive for clients. Then you have individual folders per client. And then you have individual folders, per service line or department, that client has. And then you have subfolders, for certain KPIs or other deliverables, per timeline, et cetera, et cetera. So start, from the big to the little, and that will help guide that organization, across the board, so that everybody starts to get into the rhythm of looking, okay, what is the category, or the topic that I'm talking about that I need to find information about. Then I'm going to go down a step and down a step and down a step. And the beautiful thing about this too is that once you get into the rhythm of this and you have like consistent naming conventions, then anybody could find anything anywhere, because it's then less about, even I'd say, the structure of it, the framework. It's then like you could search. And if you have the same naming conventions and that it's all organized in the proper way, then you could just do a search again in Slack, in Drive, in your project management tool, and you could find what you're looking for in the snap of a finger, right? So that's where organization really starts to play, at the bigger table with us, right? Is that it is not just like, oh, I want to have my way, I want to have my details organized. It's how does the whole organization work cohesively together. There is one base standard that they can all work off of. So that's where like killer organization in all your tools, all your platforms, just get it working in the same direction, get everyone in the same rhythm, and that's where you can really start growing.
Naming things in a certain way. It's funny, like a lot of people like, what's the value? I know where to find my files, but it's that one file which you just can't find. And you're like, you pray to God, did I name it correctly? And because you did, then you can find it. So it's worth it just for that one time that you need it. You'll be able to find it.
And it's so funny because I feel like it probably goes back mostly to my SEO days, where it's all keyword based, right? And so oftentimes, if I'm searching for something, I know like the top 2 or 3 keywords that are going to go off in my head, for when I'm searching for it. And again, that kind of goes back to the documentation and the open communication, is that even if you haven't named something a very specific way, say that your keyword is slightly different, if you can get close enough to it, just like in SEO, right? If you can get close enough to it, or a relative, broad match, then you can find it, because it's going to be, again, in the public domain, it's going to be in the sphere, that you can find it, relatively easily. And then there's just less time for everyone to have to like point you in this direction, or you have to spend 20 minutes, going through folder after folder. So again, it just makes everyone's lives easier. And I will say one asterisk to all that is my rule of thumb is that if you can't find something or you can't find the answer, after 10 minutes, just ask. Because if you're then going to like the 15th keyword in your head and you still can't find it, like just ask. It's totally okay just to have, that one moment of like, oh, I can't find this, because I can guarantee someone is like, oh, yep, it's right here. So don't ever box yourself in of like, oh, I have to only search for something, or I have to only, do it this way. I aim for like the 80-85%, is good. Yeah. And then there'll always be in agencies, there'll always be a little flex.
Leah, thank you so much for navigating the 3 secrets to building high-performing teams in remote digital marketing agencies. And just as a summary, so everyone remembers, that's number 1, build an amazing team onboarding experience. Number 2, have transparent communication between team members. And number 3, have killer organization in your tools and platforms. So Leah, it's time for the lightning round. Can you let us know what are your top 3 books?
Okay, this is the hardest question that I get on podcasts, because I have so many books I would recommend. But my top 3 that I am very confident in, everyone will benefit from in some way, shape, or form. The first one is Traction. I'm a firm believer in the EOS system, and the yes and comes into that because I believe in EOS and I'm not a purist. So Traction, it's an entrepreneurial operating system. Sorry, I should explain that for EOS. Second book is Profit First. Feel like everyone can benefit from this, no matter if you're an agency owner, or you are an independent contractor, or, a full-time specialist. Everyone can benefit from this in their financial path. And then the third is Multipliers. I love this book. This is by Liz Wiseman. And it is such a beautiful explanation of some of our well-known beliefs around management and leadership. And instead of just like adding more people in, it's really about learning, how to, again, get people in the right fit in the right seat, and then help multiply, their positive effect, amongst one another. So those are the top 3 that I come back to: Traction, by Gina Wickman, Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, I believe, and Multipliers by Liz Wiseman.
And I know there was a podcast you also wanted to share with us. What's your go-to podcast?
Right now, it's The Science of Success. I love this because they are so steeped in using the scientific method, throughout their own experiences in becoming better people, having, better performance, whether it's, having a better life, personally, and or, it is, encouraging better results in whatever work they are doing. They bring on some of the best individuals, for interviews, for input and guidance, on how to be the best that you can be. And I firmly believe in expecting the best from yourself and doing what you can to bring it forth. And this is one of the ways that, I constantly encourage it, at my own home, and that I would like to always share out with others.
So Leah, where can listeners connect with or learn more about you and your business?
So first and foremost, I would say LinkedIn. That is where I am the most active. You can find me on LinkedIn, Leah Leaves. And it's pronounced like Princess Leia, but written like Leah. So you'll see Leah, Leaves. So Leah Leaves on LinkedIn. And then my website is alderonenterprise.com. You can find out all about me and my team, there.
Wonderful. Well, Leah, this has really been such an informative discussion. I'm sure there are plenty of agency owners who are going to be, man, this is great stuff. So thank you so much for being on the Digital Marketing Mentor. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Digital Marketing Mentor. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. Be sure to check us out online at thedmmentor.com and at the DM Mentor on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more marketing mentor magic. See you next time.